I'm Mitch Carl. We're at the Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo and Aquarium. I'm the curator of aquatics.
Hello, I'm John Rossi. I'm a touring drummer with a passion for animal conservation. When I'm on the road, I spend as much time as possible visiting zoos, aquariums, and conservation organizations. Now, I want to share those places with you. I'll be talking to keepers, vets, conservationists, anyone who can help me in my mission of connecting my people to animals through their people. Join me on my Rossifari. Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome back to the Rossifari podcast. All right, y'all, so we've got a really exciting episode coming your way this week because we are coming to you from another new to the podcast zoo. And frankly, it's one that I've been dying to get on for a long time because it is easily one of the best zoos in the country. I am talking about Henry Dorley Zoo, which is located in Omaha, Nebraska. And today's episode comes from there with an interview with Mitch Carl, who takes care of all of the aquatic things at the zoo and aquarium. So we're talking life support and also taking care of the aquarium and the team there. So we do a lot of talking about what goes into all of that. The zoo has some very specialized habitats and some really cool stuff going on, some really unique stuff with their water filtration and just how they use water in their zoo. There's a whole dark swamp area of the zoo, and there's this one bat habitat. You need to hang on till towards the end just to hear the insane amount of work that goes into one single fruit bat habitat at this zoo. I've never seen anything like it, and it is absolutely amazing. So we'll get to all of that in a minute, but before we do, a couple of quick reminders. First of all, make sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss any of these absolutely brilliant interview episodes or any of my Friday Zoo News episodes. Also, make sure you're following along on the socials at Rossifari and on TikTok at Rossifari Pod. And if you're feeling like supporting the podcast, you can do so for as little as $3 a month by going to patreon.com/Rossifari. And for those of you that are in sticker tiers, don't worry. I know you understand there was a little delay, but your April and May stickers are on the way. I'll be revealing them on socials soon, and y'all are going to lose your minds. Well worth the wait. And there are actually going to be a little couple extra bonuses in there for you for your patience. So I hope y'all enjoy that. So yeah, with all of that said, let's get to it. Here's my interview with Mitch Carl of Omaha's Henry Dorley Zoo and Aquarium.
I kind of manage everything in the zoo that has water in it.
There's a lot of stuff with water here. I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about. So just to clarify, then you're not just in the aquarium, right? You're in any one of the places with water.
Correct. So it's kind of depends what it is and what I do with that. So for different areas, say for the jungle has a ton of freshwater exhibits. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are mammal pools and fish pools, things like that. So in those instances, I'm in charge of the water clarity, the water quality. So my life support team will take care of the filtration, pumps, filters, ozone, all that fun stuff. I'm not in charge of the people. So the people that actually take care of the exhibits, take care of the fish, do the backwashes, things like that. I'm not in charge of those. So in the aquarium, that's my main gig. So I take care of are in charge of the LSS team that does that, the aquarists that are in that building, all the exhibits. But throughout the zoo, if there's water in it, sea lions, for example, is another one where I'm in charge of all the filtration, water quality, all that, but not in charge of anything to do with the animals or the people. I'm also lucky enough to be in charge of the stream and the splash pads for the kids in the summertime. So we're in charge of all that too. And that was complete sarcasm if you didn't get that.
Yes, I did. Okay, so the first question that I have, and I find LSS to be so fascinating, so we have lots to talk about here. But y'all have, first of all, this zoo is just incredible. And there
Thank you.
is so much and so diverse and so big. But one of the coolest things that we saw here so far was that there is this awesome desert dome. And then underneath the main desert, there is a swamp. And the swamp has 4 beavers in it that we got to see some training with yesterday. That was incredible. And my first question, the first thing that goes through my mind when you talk about water quality is, how do you make sure that the water quality is good in an area where you can't even see the clarity of it because it is dark?
Well, that makes it easy. It always looks good in the dark, That's a pretty simple system on that one. That's just mainly big pumps and sand filtration. So the sand filters are mechanical filtration. So that's just taking out all that beaver poop and fish poop and all that stuff to keep that water nice and clear. So sand filters are pretty simple filters, and they filter down to about 20 microns. So that's below that what we can see. So that gives you that clarity in that water. But it is easy when you all that, if you see the swamp and all the other kingdoms of the night during the daytime, it looks pretty shabby because all the stuff that you can see, turn the lights off, it becomes a magical and alone environment. So it does make it a little bit easier to take care of those exhibits and to hide stuff and make it a little more reality for it.
That's interesting. I would have guessed just the opposite, that would be the hardest thing. So doing life support systems is such it's an incredibly important and it's an incredibly specialized thing in the zoo field. How did you find your way into this? What's your background?
My background is I had fish tanks as a kid. So my sister worked at a pet store here in town, and she had some fish tanks at home, and I thought my sister was kind of cool. I still do. She's still a pretty cool girl. But I thought that was pretty fascinating. So I started working at the same pet store that she did. She got me a job there when I was 15, 16, and I started keeping fish at home. And I was just fascinated by control of the whole entire environment. So keeping a fish alive is in my mind, a little bit harder than just your normal cat or dog, since you have to keep in control of all the oxygen, water quality, all that fun stuff. So I just got fascinated as a kid, and then a few things happened in my life where things changed, and I started being in a situation where I got exposed to corals, and that was my passion from then on, learning how to take care of corals, having reef tanks. I had a business where I did that for businesses and homeowners that had reef tanks at home, and I just got fascinated by it and got a job here when I was pretty young, and I've been doing it ever since. So that's been my passion, has been reef tanks, corals, inverts, things like that over the years. And the zoo has really been a great experience for me because they kind of let me run with that throughout my career here.
Nice. That's really cool. I'm super curious. What do you think it is that draws you to coral? Is it their cute little faces?
I think it's just the challenge. So, when I started back in the day, that was in 1996, I think, is when I first started doing coral reef tanks and such. Back then, it was very, very difficult in the early 90s to keep a coral. So we didn't really have the technology, the lighting technology, the filtration technology that we do now, or the know-how. And so it's kind of like in its infancy. So that was one of the kind of the cool things about it, is not a lot of people were doing it. The Reef Aquarium Volume 1, which is like the Holy Bible that came out on reef aquariums, was just coming out at that time. So doing something that was a challenge. These animals aren't easy to keep alive in captivity or get to grow. And heck, we just learned how to spawn them about 5-6 years ago in captivity. So you can't really say that about many other animals in captivity, that we are just now learning how to breed them. So that to me has just always been a fascinating aspect of them, just and make that whole environment. It's a multi-species exhibit. So you have the fish, you have the corals, you have all the other inverts that kind of all interact, and who goes along with what, and who gets along with what, and who eats what. And to me, it's always just been a fascinating environment to work with.
Nice, very cool. And then, so the aquarium here is nice. It's a great building. It's very cool. I like that the eatery outside of it is called the Sea Turtle Cafe. I was pleased to see that you don't serve sea turtle there. I was a little concerned.
Not anymore. I didn't go over well, yeah.
Fair, yeah. But so I'm really curious about just, the aquarium in general. Talk to me about some of the exhibits there, some of the mixed species habitats you're talking about, and what goes into maintaining all of that.
Sure. Well, the original aquarium was actually opened in the mid 80s, and we still have that part of the aquarium. So when the aquarium was rebuilt in 1994 and 1995 during the renovation, that big expansion, they actually kept the old part of the aquarium and kind of redid it a little bit. So that's when I started, was just a little bit after the major renovation and expansion in 1995. So I started in 97. And we did another renovation in 2011, which we kind of gutted the whole insides, redid a lot of the exhibits. I did another renovation in 2019 where we did a lot of the outside work. We did a couple of exhibits then. So it's been fun to be part of those renovations and be part of the thought process of what we're doing, how we're doing it, what's the new stuff we're doing. So yeah, it's been a good ride. It's a good team that runs it. So we have 7 aquarists. Those are the people that I'm in charge of. So 7 aquarists and 1 supervisor in the aquarium. Then we also have a bird crew. So the bird crew takes care of the puffins and the penguins. That's a crew of 5 from there. So one big team that works out, and my LSS team does kind of the whole zoo. So they're doing all the sea lions, like I said, the adventure trails, the splash pad, jungle, dome, but they're also part of the aquarium too. So doing all the pumps and things that are inside the aquarium too. So it's a nice sized crew that's kind of taking care of everything. But it's been a lot of fun. All the different exhibits, since I kind of have that bend towards corals, I kind of force my way in there and make corals kind of one of the highlights because in my philosophy, you don't come to the zoo to see fake animals. So nobody comes to the zoo and wants to see a fake tiger.
Right.
So why am I going to put a fake coral in an exhibit? So we are kind of limited on some things. You can't put a coral in every exhibit just because of their requirements and needs. But for any exhibit that I can have a background of live coral, we kind of try to strive to do that and make more naturalistic environments and more dynamic environments. And I hope we're doing that.
That's awesome. No, I love that. I think that's very cool. I did not realize what all goes into coral propagation. And then when I was down in Florida doing some interviews at Moat Marine Lab, they sent me to their coral propagation lab. And it is
out in Fruitvale.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, it's crazy to see that. And I'm amazed at how it's almost like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a non-zooey way to compare it. It's almost like baking really challenging baked goods, because you know how, like, if you've ever watched one of those baking shows, it's like, if this goes for 1 minute too long, it will all collapse and then they cut to commercial, right? And I feel like coral are very similar to that. So can you talk a little bit about like how much goes into that propagation and how much of that you guys are able to do here and all of that?
Sure. Propagation in one aspect is very simple. So
I love that everything that I'm like, this is really hard, right? You're like, nah, this is easy. You can tell you've got the best of the best when it's just like, nah, this stuff's easy.
It really is. I mean, if you are able to grow a coral, and for the most part, we can grow corals pretty easy these days. Of course, you have thousands of species of corals, and so you have some that are still nearly impossible to keep in captivity, and some you have are weeds. So kind of run the gamut. But for the most part, the majority of coral species we can grow fairly simply now these days with what we have. And if you're growing a coral, you can propagate that coral asexually. So it's just like a plant where you run under a saw, scissors, razor blades, kind of however you want to break this coral apart. You can break this coral apart, then make another one. But you're just making clones of it. But you can make thousands upon thousands of clones just by fragmenting these animals up. So that's the easy part of it. The hard part is doing sexual reproduction and getting these animals to reproduce sexually. So in the wild, these animals only reproduce sexually, for the most part, once a year. So they have, these are for the broadcast spawners. The broadcast spawners reproduce one time every year. So, and the reason they do that is they have to expound a bunch of energy to kind of get their gametes, get the sperm, get the eggs, all that stuff. So it kind of takes them a long time to build up to that moment. And then they have one specific moment where they all spawn. Usually it's a couple days after the full moon, and they all have the same time. So one of the projects I work on is Elkhorn coral, and it spawns 3 or 4 days after the full moon in August at 9:15 p.m. So kind of crazy that
so
an animal
weird.
with no Facebook, nothing to communicate, kind of knows how to do that. But it has a lot of different things to do with the water temperature, the tidal cycles, the moonlight, all this different stuff kind of brings them to that one moment. So that's the hard part in captivity, is what we've tried to been doing for years and years and years, is figuring out how to do that. So that's what we've, and not by we, I mean the couple of people that have figured that out, to do that, where you warm up the water during the year, you do all these different type of things to get them to that one moment where they all spawn at the same time. So like I said, that's only been in the last probably 5-6 years that we've kind of cracked that code, and now we're able to get them to spawn in captivity.
Okay, that's very cool. And is the reason for wanting to do it sexually when you can obviously just do the asexual just genetic diversity, or is there any other reason behind that?
It's mainly genetic diversity and numbers. It's a lot harder to do. It's a lot more space. It's a lot more effort, but the results are better. And most of the stuff that we're doing for sexual reproduction is for putting stuff back out in the ocean. So that's what mainly things. You want to get thousands upon thousands of the most diverse things you can, corals you can get. So that's mainly what we're doing sexual reproduction for. So when you're down at Moat, down in Florida, they're doing a lot of sexual reproduction things down there where they're selling them out, and then we're putting them back on the reef when they're 3 months old, 6 months old, 9 months old, different stages. So you can get thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of babies from a sexual reproduction event, where through fragmentation, you can get hundreds type of thing. But both of them work. It's just right now we're trying to do the sexual reproduction thing. We want to get as most genetically diverse animals that we can.
Makes sense. And I assume that like how much, obviously my listeners know a lot about SSPs and stuff like that. So, when you're talking about a red panda, we know all of their genetics and all that. How much tracking is done with that with coral? I've never heard of, the couple thousand coral SSPs, so I assume that's not a thing. And does it matter as much, or is it, since they are animals but are more plant-like animals, it's genetic diversity is important, but it's not the same as like you don't want inbred, binturongs or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. That's fair.
Genetics is very important. I don't know how it kind of relates to mammals, to corals.
Right.
And with corals, we have a hard time. There's no SSP for corals. And we have a hard time figuring out what we even have for a species of corals. So to figure that is the number one thing. So for the most part, we're doing mostly the sexual reproduction in Caribbean corals. So Caribbean corals are endangered. There's not a lot of them left. They're all kind of dying. It's not a very good situation right now for Caribbean corals. But there's not a lot of them as far as diversity goes. So they're very easy to tell species and easy to look at that, so we can breed those pretty easily. In the endo, you get thousands upon thousands of species, hundreds upon hundreds of acropora, and they're you can take one species of acropora and it looks different in 5 different environments. So you put it under heavy wave flow, put it under big sunlight, low sunlight, all this other stuff. They'll take different growth forms and shapes and sizes. So it's really, really hard to determine the genetics of them. So right now we're mainly working with Caribbean because of that. And we know how to breed them. We know how to raise them. And there's a lot of different programs involved right now that are trying to do restoration efforts around Florida. So that's kind of what we're focusing on right now. But the main thing we want to do with genetics is try to find a coral that's better adapted to what we're changing this world to. So a project I was involved with in Palau was trying to create, like kind of the buzzword is a super coral, a coral that can withstand higher temperatures and pollution and things like that. So that's one of the main things that we were doing, is trying to figure out how through genetics we can make these corals more resilient.
That's really interesting. I feel like again, you don't hear a lot about that type of thing with mammals. And I think that's interesting. I could even see an argument being made that is going to be the future of conservation for other species as well. So it's interesting to hear that coral are already doing it.
I think we do that with mammals. I mean, look at a dog. So you have all these different species of dog. I mean, they're all a dog, but they're all different types of dog, and you breed them for hunting. You breed them for I don't know what they do with dogs. I'm not a mammal guy, but they breed them, put a long hair on them, short hairs, all this different stuff for dogs. And that's kind of what we're trying to do with corals is maybe right now this coral only lives from 78 to 82 degrees. And when it goes below that or above that, it has issues. Well, can I make this coral the same coral, but be okay at 84 degrees or 86 degrees? So that's kind of what we're doing, is finding out who is more adapted to that. And it becomes a little more complicated with corals because it's hard to figure out if the coral is adapted to that or the algae that's inside of it's adapted to that. So every coral has zooxanthellae algae that's inside of it. That's what makes it a symbiotic, which lets off sunlight, all that fun stuff. So when a coral bleaches because it gets too hot, it's expelling that algae to try to get a different algae inside that is more adapted to that higher temp. So is the coral pushing that? It's the algae pushing that. That's kind of what we're working through right now, and trying to find out what genetic trait is being passed on that's helping it be adapted to warmer temperatures.
Wow. Okay. That's this is fun. I talk to a lot of, mammal people and occasionally like fish people and stuff. But when you really get into the inverts and especially coral, it's just y'all are your own subspecies. I'm just gonna say it that way in the best way possible.
I feel the same thing about you mammal people. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure. Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever heard anyone on this podcast be like, ugh, dogs. That was amazing.
Yeah,
I'm here for it.
I do have a cat, if that helps my reputation at all. But
I mean, cats are, yeah, that's fair.
My one mammal thing.
That's awesome. So let's talk about some of the animals other than the coral in the aquarium. What are some of your favorites?
Well, I don't know. Fish-wise, there's so many to pick from. Mm-hmm. My favorite fish is a frogfish. That's what I always go back to. I had a frogfish as some of my first fish when I was getting into salt water, and actually had a pair that ended up breeding, and I thought that was absolutely fascinating at that time. But still a fish that's, to my knowledge, has never been raised from egg before. So, but they're a fascinating fish. Great. I was going to say great personality, but they don't have a personality. But just in general, reef fish, I think I love diving. I love going out on reefs. I love all the colors that reef fish have, all the things that they're adapted to, the different things that they have that make their little niche work. So yeah, I'm mainly a saltwater guy. I did have some freshwater when I was a kid, and I haven't really touched on that too much throughout my career here. But yeah, I would say frogfish is one of my favorites.
That's cool.
If you want to put a favorite on that.
That's cool. I like it. What, y'all have sea turtles here, right?
We do. We have two.
Two, and it's a green and a loggerhead?
That is correct.
Yes. So I'm a big sea turtle guy.
All right.
So I'm going to ask you to tell me anything that you can about your sea turtles, including the big thing I have to ask is, are you able to have live coral in with your sea turtles? Because I know that in some other facilities, they can be problem children.
They are, and it's not necessarily them, but it's the environment. So we have them in our largest tank. Anytime you have a real large tank like that, you have depth issues. So our tank is 18 feet deep. And it's very hard to light an exhibit that big for corals, and it's hard to keep the water chemistry okay for corals. So that's the main reason we don't have corals in that exhibit. However, turtles will eat corals and everything else. Harold, our loggerhead turtle, he'll bite anything and try to eat anything. So we try to keep that out of them. But yeah, we do have two. We have a green and a loggerhead. Kind of the cool thing about the loggerhead, he's amelanistic. So that's why he's a little bit yellowish in color.
Okay.
And one cool thing about our turtles is they're both healthy and fine. So that's something that you don't find too much, because almost every turtle that's in captivity is a rehab turtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they're all endangered. You can't just go get turtles, but the only way you can get a turtle is through the federal government when they deem a turtle non-releasable. So they have a certain protocol. If a turtle gets a boat strike or a shark attack or something, they bring it into captivity, try to rehab it, release it. After a few times coming back, then they deem it non-releasable. And that's when they use it for any educational purposes, which is mainly zoos and things like that. But both our turtles came from different environments. So Merv, our green sea turtle, was actually part of a research project. So there's a Canadian researcher that was doing studies on their lung capacity and physiology of their capacity of that, and how they go deep diving, and how they breathe, and how they hold their breath underwater, all that fun stuff. So we actually had two greens from that he got from one of the turtle farms down in the Caymans, where they do head starts and turtle releases. and got them as small individuals. Had them for over 20 years doing different research on them. Ended up retiring and needed to find a home for them. So they're 2 perfectly good turtles and didn't have any issues with them. So we got the 2. We ended up giving Bruno to Point Defiance out in Washington. And then Harold was actually another Head Start turtle where they sometimes they take babies from the beach, they put them in captivity for about a year or 2, let them get nice and big, and then put them out on the reef and give them a better chance of surviving. But Harold was amelanistic, so he kind of stuck out like a sore thumb with his yellow coloration and was deemed non-releasable just because he'd be a big-time target in the ocean. So kept him back, so he's also perfect, which is so nice. I mean, most of the rehab turtles, they have what we call bubble butt, where they float, and we had one of those before, or they're missing flippers, and there's just a lot of issues, and to have 2 healthy sea turtles is kind of a nice blessing for us.
Honestly, that's amazing. So sea turtles are, like I said, one of my favorite animals. I love them to death. And I think it's incredible that almost every turtle that you'll see in human care is, like you said, injured, rehab, non-releasable. You're going to see the bubble butt. You're going to see missing fins, all that stuff. I think it's incredible. They're great stories.
Yeah.
However, I will tell you that I recently was at the New England Aquarium's Turtle Hospital, where they bring in mostly cold stunned turtles, right? And I was looking at all of these turtles that were perfect. They've been cold stunned, but they're fine. They're healing up. I actually got to see a release of a few of them. And it was such an emotional thing because I'm so used to seeing these broken, unhealthy turtles getting their best lives. I love it. I really do. But as just a fan of this animal, to see perfect sea turtles was stunning. Yeah. And I even mentioned in that episode how, you don't really get to do this at zoos and aquariums. So it's really cool that those 2 are so perfect. And I was wondering, because I couldn't really see the loggerhead very well, was sleeping kind of in a corner when I was here yesterday. But the green sea turtle was swimming around, and I was like, oh, yeah, you look good, friend. So that makes a lot of sense. That's really cool. I was entertained because where the loggerhead was sleeping was right where the green sea turtle sign is. And even though I understand logically doesn't mean anything, they don't know that, I had this moment where I saw this loggerhead, and especially the fact that it's amelanistic makes a lot of sense because it did look a little different to me. But I saw a green sea turtle sign and this kind of yellowish turtle, and I was like, that's not a green sea turtle. Look at its head. That's a loggerhead. This is labeled. You're an idiot. And it just took that moment. I was like, no, the turtle doesn't stay with its sign.
We're working on the training right now to make the turtles stick by their signs all day.
Perfect, yeah.
For that, but
just put a target on the back
it's not going that well right now. So
I love that. Yeah, I was very entertained, and that shows how tired I am on this trip because I literally was like, that's not right. No, I'm an idiot, but it's okay.
It's nice that you admit that.
Yes. Many times I have to admit that. Very cool. I love sea turtles. One of my favorite things about turtles in general is that they have just existed for so long. They have survived so much change in this world. And if you ever see one try to, eat, swim, hunt, exist at all, you don't understand how that one has existed for 10 minutes. Yeah. They are the biggest goobers, and they somehow just keep going through all of it.
Observing sea turtles for almost 30 years in aquariums, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. They're not the brightest bulb, but I don't know I don't know how they make it in the wild with some of the decisions that they make with things that they try to eat and kind of lumbering through life, but somehow they're doing it.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Should encourage us all that if they can make it, we can.
Exactly. So talk to me, about some of the other stuff in the aquarium that is maybe a challenge, or maybe I have to believe that something is challenging here. If you keep saying everything's easy, they're just going to let you go. They're going to be like, we don't need this guy. So what is the most challenging aspect or challenging exhibit or whatever of your job?
I would say one of the more challenging things besides corals is the jellyfish that we have. Okay. The jellyfish it can be a big challenge just to keep on exhibit. We do have to have special exhibits called chrysals or pseudochrysals that help these jellyfish stay alive. And by that, it's a special tank that keeps them kind of just in the middle of the tank. You don't want a jellyfish scraping the sides, hitting the bottom, hitting the walls all the time, or getting sucked into the screens or filtration, all that fun stuff. So, but not only that, trying to reproduce them. And not only that, finding somebody that knows how to do this is one of the hardest things. So finding specialized people in this industry is kind of one of the hardest things to do. Finding a life support people, finding a jellyfish person, finding a coral person is kind of one of the more challenging things to do. Luckily here at the zoo, we have Andy Hendricks that has been here for, I don't know, probably 15 years. Started here as a volunteer kid when he was in high school and has been here ever since. And he's just an amazing jelly aquarist. And to know how to raise up the polyps, how to strangulate the polyps, how to get the ephira raised up. You're talking about starting with a tiny 1 millimeter polyp and starting with a jellyfish that's not much bigger than that, and raise them up. Not only that, but some of our jellyfish eat jellyfish, so you're raising up jellyfish to feed to other jellyfish and trying to get those numbers up and keep those numbers up. It's just a constant battle, and jellyfish aren't too forgiving in that regard. So also you're talking about other stuff like sharks. Keeping a big shark in a big tank with other fish and can be challenging. And a lot of our sharks are getting to be what we would call geriatric sharks, where we've had them in captivity for over 30 years. So they're probably, who knows how old when we got them. So trying to take care of some geriatric sharks and some of the things that we have to do with them. And so I would say anytime you have mixed species exhibits where you have multiple species together, it's always a challenge to keep everybody happy, keep everybody not fighting, and it's a constant battle.
Makes sense. I'm very curious about life support systems. So I have had the absolute honor of going through so many behind the scenes areas at aquariums. I volunteered at Aquarium of Niagara, up in Niagara Falls, and I'm constantly amazed at just the sheer number of things. There are tubes and pipes, and there are the little, each one of them has their little section where you can turn the flow on and off or send it from one to the other, or all of these little intricacies that I feel like if you haven't seen it and you're listening to this, whatever you're picturing in your head isn't nearly in depth enough. There are like thousands of all of these little pieces of gear and choices that have to be made with the flow and all of that stuff. And so I'm just curious, like, how equipped are y'all and what do you do when something goes wrong with some of that? Because, gosh, it seems like one piece of a Lego set would break or something in the middle, and you have to figure that out. That's kind of the best non-aquarium way I can think to put it.
Well, under my leadership, nothing's ever gone wrong.
Nice, so, good. Yeah, I like that. Good. All right, moving on from that question.
Yeah. No, things go wrong all the time, and it can be employee-induced, or it can be just something breaks. Right. So people make mistakes, and people overflow tanks and walk away from tanks. Things like that happen. We try to reduce that as much as possible with training and other things, but mistakes do happen. But the main thing is things that break. So things that break always break at 2:00 in the morning on a Saturday. So that's the main issue that we have. And most of the time you can fix things like that through redundancy, having 2 pumps on a system, having 2 filters on a system. If you have an aeration system, you have a backup aeration system. Even our entire building is backed up by a 12-cylinder diesel engine generator. So power goes out, which is our main issue, is power outages and things like that. So our entire building is backed up by that. But just having a plan. So everything's going to break. Having stuff on the shelves to fix all those things. Having people that know what they're doing to fix those things. Having all those plans in place really helps out that. So yeah, we just try to avoid those situations as best we can and deal with them like we're trained to do when they do happen.
Makes sense. I'm curious. I know that, in this podcast, I talk to a lot of mammal people. I talk to a lot of training people. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is that it takes a long time to build relationships with animals and really get to know them. So I'm curious, when you bring somebody new in or somebody, comes to your area or whatever, how long does it take them to build that relationship and get trained with these hugely complex systems? I know they're not training them, but, I think it's kind of the same idea.
It really depends on who you're getting.
Okay.
So here in the Midwest and at our zoo, it's fairly hard to get somebody that has a lot of experience. So what tends to happen in my field is, as being an aquarist, everybody wants to be on the coast. Your whole life is saltwater and all the stuff that we love, and so you want to be on the coast. And so I get that. Everybody likes to go to the coast. So we tend to get a lot of people that are new in the industry, a lot of people right out of college or interns. And so there is a lot of training that goes involved in that. They haven't been in a setting like this before. And so everybody at the aquarium has a partnership, so they have a backup partner. So hopefully that if somebody quits and somebody comes in new, that partner is that person that they're tagged along with all day, and that's showing the ropes. So we do have a training program through our supervisor and through our lead, who is Andy, that they kind of show them the ropes through that. But it's just a slow process. And we try to instill in them, hey, if you don't know what you're doing, if you have a question, stop, take a moment, ask us. We're always available on text, radio, intercom, whatever, to answer those questions. And but just making sure they understand the systems before they start doing things. Just thinking through where the water goes, how the water goes there, how the water gets there, just what all the valves do, things like that. Hopefully we have simple enough systems that they can get it pretty quickly and understand how things work, and a little bit of training helps that out a lot.
That makes sense. It's fascinating to me. I get you actually did a great job explaining why the whole, not being near an ocean thing, but it's the Henry Dorley Zoo. It is one of the, if not the best zoo in the country. The idea that it's hard to get experienced people is pretty fascinating. But you explained it really well. It makes sense.
I would say that we're a great zoo, but we're a small aquarium.
That's fair. That's true.
We're an aquarium inside of a zoo. So we're not a Monterey Bay. We're not a Shed Aquarium. We're not, I just came back from Baltimore last week to the National Aquarium.
Oh, such a great place.
We're just we're not that big.
Right.
So it's a good training ground for people to come in. I do find that people that are from this area tend to stick around a lot more. So hiring people from the Midwest, people who have family here. Right. I'm here for a few different reasons. I'm here because I grew up in Omaha. So I've been here my whole life. I like Omaha, so I'm never going to leave. And this place has never given me a reason to leave. So we try to keep our people happy and try to keep their minds, always doing different projects, always thinking about different things to keep them engaged. So hopefully if they get here, they want to stay here. And so I think once they get here and see what we have, see what the city has to offer, I think we, for the most part, can keep people for a long time. It's just kind of a hard time getting them to see that, getting them to get here for an interview or apply for a job.
Sure. That makes sense. I remember my first time here was a couple of years ago, and I booked a gig in Kearney, Nebraska. And I booked it specifically because I knew that on my days off, I was going to be able to go to Lincoln Children's Zoo and here, two places I had heard were fantastic and had not been able to visit. So I literally took weeks of work to come here. And I will say the biggest surprise to me on that whole trip was not how lovely and interactive Lincoln is or how just incredible this facility is. It was how great both towns were, and especially Omaha. I had a blast outside of the zoos, and I normally go to the zoo from open to close and then hide in my hotel room because I'm tired.
Sure.
But the towns were so cool that they called me out, and I had a great time. So yeah, for anybody listening, because one thing that this podcast I know has going for it is a lot of people when they're looking at maybe getting a job at a new place, they check out episodes from Rossifari and try to get the vibe of the place.
Sure.
And so I will just put right on here that Omaha's a fun town. Not to mention that if you are a zoo person and you're interested in let's face it, we all like going to other zoos and aquariums and checking them out. Within a couple hours, you've also got the Kansas City Zoo and you've got, Topeka and all these great Sunset's awesome. So yeah, there is a lot of cool stuff out here, but I can also see why. I think when I told my mom about this trip, she was like, you guys are going where? Why? Vacations are cool, but you're going to the Midwest?
Omaha's a great town. It's big enough. We just passed 1 million people, so
nice. Big
milestone there. But it's big enough where you get all the cool stuff of a big city, but usually not big enough to get all the bad stuff of a big city. So don't have a lot of traffic, don't have a lot of crime. good place to bring up a family, all that fun stuff. I admit winters do suck. It's not a very, that could be a long winter sometimes, but spring, fall are great. Summer's usually all right. So it's not a bad place to be.
Yeah, no, I enjoy it out here tremendously. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts. I know you're not a big mammal person, but outside of the animals that you deal with,
sure, is
there anything here that you find particularly, any animals that you find particularly special or cool?
I like to think that I get out every now and then and look at other animals. Let me think. I would say one of the cool things we have is the eye.
Yes,
I think is pretty cool. That's an animal that I've been lucky enough to get to know some of the other keepers, and they take you down and show you some cool stuff. So feeding the eye. It's just a bizarre animal. I'm sure there's some other mammal that I like.
That's a really good one.
That's a good one.
You're just being you just like weird things.
Yeah, I do like I like our bat exhibits.
Okay,
I will say. Yeah. So the short-tailed fruit bats in the Kingdoms of the Night, I think is a great exhibit. Just the sheer number of bats in there, and I've had the good fortune, maybe not really, to go in there because I've had to plumb a few things that are in that system and. Walking in, do thousands upon thousands of bats around your head and keep on telling yourself it's just water when you keep on getting hit by pee from them. That's always a fun part. But I think that's a great exhibit. It's one of my favorite exhibits in the zoo just to look into. So I'd say that's two enough?
Yeah, no, that's good. You're good. I don't want to stress your brain out, make you think about mammals too much. But I will tell you, actually, when we were going through the zoo yesterday, my immediate thought was, I'm going to be back. We're going to do this again. And the two things I want to talk about the most on the next episode are just the domes, the way that all works. Like talk to some keepers there and find out what it's like for them. But then specifically that fruit bat exhibit. It is. We were here yesterday when they had all their food out, and it's all laid out beautifully, and it looks like a buffet. And there are, like you said, thousands of bats flying around, and it's all water at the bottom. And I have been doing this podcast for almost 5 years now, talking to mostly keepers, and I cannot figure out how any of that works, how the husbandry works, how any of it works. I really want to talk to people involved with that the next time I'm here, because that was, we just stood at that habitat and we were both like, how? It's incredible. It's beautiful. I love bats. I've been in a few bat habitats and I like that. I think they're amazing animals, but that was just, yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty cool. I've been involved in the life support of it. It's been what used to be a nightmare. But yeah, I used to have water underneath of it. So the theory was that they would poop and pee in the water, and the filtration would take it out. But there are just so many bats in there that the sand filtration just become bricked, and flow would drop. It was just horrible. So I ended up actually taking that offline. Now all it is it's city water that's on a timer. So it has an automatic valve on it, and I don't know how long it is, but every 60 minutes or every hour or so, a valve opens up and it's just high pressure water that just sprays the floor down and goes to a drain and takes all that out and cleans the floor and closes the valve. So it's nice being automated and not have to worry about all that stuff that we had to worry about before. So it's nice and simple and easy to do for right now.
That's actually really cool. And that actually it brings up an interesting question. So, technology tends to change and grow pretty quickly. How much is that happening with life support systems? How much does that impact you? How much do you have to keep up with it and all of that? How easy is it to adapt to new technologies? And last but not least, in this big tech question, does the AZA keep up with it? Because obviously accreditation is incredibly important. Do you ever run into a type of situation where you're like, oh, we found this new filtration thing, but it's not approved yet or something like that?
Not really. AZA kind of stays out of that as far as what's approved or not approved. So that's not really a thing. But
that's cool.
Most of the technology that we use is stuff that's fairly old technology. It's just getting better and better over the years. So, sand filtration, that's our main mechanical filtration that takes out the junk out of the water. Sand filters have been around for 100 years, and that's what you use for pools and jacuzzis and whatever else. But the different, we use sand in there, but now we have glass media. So just a different media that we put in there. It's pretty much the same philosophy, but it works a little better. We use a lot of ozone. Ozone keeps our water nice and clear, but how ozone's produced, the machines that are used to produce it, how we utilize it, how we inject it, all that stuff has changed over the years and gotten easier and better. Things like protein skimmers, back when I started this in the 90s was pretty rudimentary for what they are now, and a pretty important device, but now they make them in any size you want and any configuration you want. So I would say that the stuff we use is pretty similar, but just has gotten better over time.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. Do you think, are people working on trying to reinvent the wheel, or do you really just not have to at this point?
Well, there's always people out there trying to reinvent the wheel, and there's all different new stuff that comes out. Some is just kind of snake oil stuff, and some actually works. But yeah, there's different chemicals people are coming out with, things that kind of bind to different things. Things like lanthanum chloride that takes out phosphates and binds to phosphate, takes that out, clarifies the water a little bit. So clarifiers like that. So a lot of chemical-induced things, but most of our mechanical stuff, pumps, filters, all that stuff is the same, but they're getting more efficient. Right. They're getting easier to work with. Things like that.
Cool. That's very cool. I think we've done a great job covering all of this. So is there a conservation organization you'd like to give a shout out to?
Well, I'm a little biased when it comes to that. So I've been working with CCOR, which stands for Sexual Co-Reproduction. I've been working with them since 2004, so over 20 years with that organization.
Wow.
But organization, I've done probably 30 trips around the world doing coral conservation trips. But it's a great organization. They're the ones that really first started doing the sexual coral reproducing, where they go out in the wild during the spawns, collect spawn, restore reefs using that spawn. So kind of one of the leaders and innovators in that. So the zoo has been a supporter of my work with CCOR and has been a supporter of CCOR for 20 years. So pretty easy for me to recommend CCOR as a conservation organization.
Awesome. I love that. And then it is time. It's time now, don't you know? We've come to the end of the show. But there's one tail left to go. You're gonna laugh and say, oh no. It's time for the Rossifari poop story.
So as an aquarist, we're brilliant enough that our animals poop in the water and our filters take it out for us. So, you never really get pooped on by a fish per se. But there's always disgusting things like protein skimmers and, when we find some of our animals that have been dead for a while, they turn into slimy messes. But probably the worst are experiences that I've had with smells and disgustingness is dead anemones, I think, take the cake for all that. So finding a dead anemone in a tank that's crawled underneath a rock and died, and you pull it out a slimy mess is probably the worst smell that is known to man, I believe. So trying to net it out and all the oozingness that goes through the net. And but I will tell you, I don't know why my brain is like this or why I'm like this, but something like that is probably the worst smell in the world. But it doesn't affect me whatsoever. But I'll tell you, if my cat vomits a hairball on the floor, I can't touch it without almost vomiting. So to me, anything my cat would do is 100 times worse than anything in the aquatic industry that I've run across. So it's like an automatic reaction with anything mammal. So.
I was just going to say, Mitch, in 5 years of doing this podcast, I have never met anyone who is more anti-mammal than you. That's incredible.
Anti-mammal. I'm just pro-aquatic.
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 That is fair. I love it.
I know what I love, and I stick with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so there you have it, folks. Very excited to welcome Henry Dorley-Zhu to the Rossifari family. And also, I want to take a moment to say thank you to the general Omaha area. Since almost the start of this podcast, whenever I look geographically at where I'm getting my most downloads from, the area around Omaha has always been one of the tops, one of the places where there are just a whole lot of people listening. So I'm glad to finally have your zoo on there. And I'm grateful for all the support that area has given Rossifari over the years. I think that's very cool. So thank you for that. I'm also going to take a moment to say thank you to all of my Red Panda level patrons, including Dr. Laura Schenk, Dr. Stephen Williamson, Barbara Bennett, Jenny Owens, Melissa Reed, Carrie Kirkpatrick, John Lewis, who is also here for stickers, and Kevin Williams. We'll be back on Friday with an all-new Zoo News episode, and until then, remember, friends, the word credits backwards is Steiderk. The Rossifari podcast is produced, hosted, and engineered by John Rossi. Editing and fact-checking by John and Dr. Zoe Rossi. Our theme song is Sevens by Nathan Burke, performed by Nathan and John. Interrupting John theme and additional voices by Taylor Isaac Gray. You can reach John directly on Instagram and Facebook at Rossifari or by email at rossifaripod@gmail.com. Rossifari is part of the Daydreamer Media Network. Now, stop listening to me and go visit a zoo.